and cows away from their
Okay.
calves.
We're going live now.
All right, sorry.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Westminster Chamber's Prop HH online forum. My name is Kelly Sloan. I'm the lobbyist for the Chamber and moderator for this morning's discussion. Probably not since the establishment of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights has there been a more contentious state ballot measure than the one we're discussing this morning with Proposition HH. Certainly, there have been few measures more complicated and perhaps confusing than the one we'll be discussing today. This next half hour will be devoted to an examination of that measure referred by the state legislature to the voters in light of dramatic property tax rate increases occasioned by the elimination of the Gallagher Amendment. With us to help present the case for and against Proposition HH are two of those most senior state legislators. Speaking for the affirmative is Senator Chris Hansen. Senator Hansen is a Democrat who represents District 31 in Denver. Prior to his appointment to the state Senate in 2020 to replace Senator Lois Court and his subsequent re-election to that chamber in 2022, he served in the State House of Representatives, to which he was elected in 2016. He received his bachelor's from Kansas State University, a master's in technology policy from MIT, and a doctorate in economic geography from Linacre College in Oxford. Welcome, Dr. Hansen.
All right. Thanks, Kelly.
For the opposition, we welcome Senator Barbara Kirkmeyer. Senator Kirkmeyer was first elected Weld County Commissioner in 1993, where she served until 2001, upon which time she was plucked by Governor Bill Owens to head up the Department of Local Affairs. She returned to county government in 2008 until elected to the state Senate in 2020, where she remains, serving alongside Senator Hansen on the powerful Joint Budget Committee. Senator Kirkmeyer received a Bachelor of Science in Education from the University of Colorado Boulder in 1980 and her teaching certificate from the state of Colorado that same year. Welcome, Commissioner Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you.
Both senators will have 10 minutes to present their arguments. That is 10 minutes, and I promise to be tyrannical in the enforcement of that limit. So I should like to begin by asking Senator Hansen to present the argument in favor of Prop HH. Senator?
All right. Kelly, thanks so much. Really wonderful to be with everyone this morning. Thank you to the Westminster Chamber for hosting this important conversation. I do have a few slides I wanted to share because I want to dispel the myth that Kelly was perpetuating, that this is complicated. Actually, I think HH is pretty straightforward, and I'm hoping to be able to explain it clearly to everyone. And I know we don't have time for any Q&A today, so I'll just run through some of this prepared material and do my best to explain the different parts of Proposition HH. On the next slide, really just want to give everyone the headline. I think there's a relatively simple way to understand HH, which is that it's direct, immediate property tax relief for every type of property in the state of Colorado. But we're doing that relief in a way that doesn't hurt the schools, the libraries, the fire districts, the other important local services that rely on property tax for their budgets. And of course, the schools are the biggest part of that, but we're all familiar with how the local finances work around firefighting districts, library districts, and the other important local services. So that's it. Property tax relief right now, immediately, that doesn't hurt our important local services. That's the headline. But there are some other parts of HH which I think are also really positive for the voters of Colorado. And so I want to be able to cover the different parts today with you. Let's go to the next slide. How did we get here? Well, Kelly mentioned we had the Gallagher Amendment in 1982. I was 7 at the time, so I don't know what senior Senator Kelly means by that. I don't think I'm there yet, nor do I think Barb is there yet. But we do get to work together at the Capitol. But you can see here kind of the history of how we got to this point. And 2020, the voters overwhelmingly said, let's take Gallagher out of the Constitution. That meant that we had a chance for direct tax relief at the legislature. We did that in 2021, 2022, and now before you in 2023 with a long-term balance package to really help to rein in these massive increases that we're seeing on the property tax side. Let's keep going to the next slide. So in summary, property tax relief for every type of property. This is particularly true for residential units, also applies to small businesses and the commercial side. $50,000 reduction for residential properties, $30,000 off the top reduction for businesses. And we'll get into some of the important details there here in a second. But the headline is $10+ billion of tax relief for all types of property owners over the next 10 years. On the for the seniors, I'll just quickly mention, and I'll do some more detail for the seniors and renters, and then this important idea of making sure that at the local level, that if local jurisdictions want to retain additional tax revenue above and beyond inflation, they have to make a decision to do so. So I believe HH creates the right dynamic for that conversation to happen at the local level. And that's, to me, another big upside of HH. All right, so let's go into some detail here quickly on the different types of properties. On the next slide, we talk about homeowners. I mentioned that $50,000 exemption that goes to $40,000 in 2024. The average homeowner, so the median home in the state, is going to save $1,000 over the next two tax years. It's about $3,200 over the next 5 tax years. So this is the immediate relief that I'm talking about for all these different types of properties. For homeowners, this is pretty significant. If we go to the next slide, you can kind of see what that looks like for different home values. I don't know what the median value is in Westminster. In Denver, it's about $700,000. So again, over $1,000 of immediate relief over the 23-24 assessment cycle. And you can see how that plays out depending on the value of your home. If we go to the next slide, we take a look at one of the parts that I think has gotten the least amount of attention that really deserves more discussion, which is how Prop HH helps fixed income seniors. You can see here that we've got a long-term problem with the senior homestead exemption. It's in the Constitution, and so we weren't able to adjust it legislatively. But what we can do in HH is to make a portable senior homestead exemption permanent. And right now, there is no portability. If you have to move or downsize or change your living arrangement as someone who already qualifies for the senior homestead exemption, right now you lose it once you make that move. It takes you 10 more years to requalify. We need to make this permanently portable, and HH does that, and we do it in a really sustainable way. And you can see for the fixed income senior, this could double the amount of property tax relief they get under HH to about $2,000 for many seniors. All right, if we go to the next slide, you can see what happens for renters. There's really an indirect and a direct mechanism here to help renters. First of all, HH puts an additional $20 million into the existing renter relief program that the state runs. It's run through the Department of Local Affairs, and we are able to then significantly increase the funding for that if HH passes. There's also the direct and indirect benefit for renters when property tax goes down. For many renters, especially small businesses, they have what are called triple net leases. If property tax goes down, then their lease goes down, and that's the direct mechanism. For some renters, though, it's indirect, meaning if you reduce property tax for the building owner, that gets passed through eventually to the renter in the form of a rent adjustment. Obviously, lots of other factors involved there with the market determining what the rent is going to be, but this obviously is going to help, especially in a situation where we're in right now, where rents are starting to come back down in the metro area as supply is catching up with demand. If we go to the next slide, we can kind of see what this looks for small businesses. This is the first property tax relief on the commercial side in more than 40 years. The HH, if it passes, takes it down from 29 down to 25.9 on the assessment rate. That's an 11% reduction. So we believe this is really material, especially for small businesses that get extra relief by that $30,000 exemption up front. And again, this is the only pathway to relief for commercial properties in the last 45 years. So I think a really attractive part of HH, especially for our small business community. All right, a couple more things I want to cover with everybody. On the next slide, we can see the other important part of this equation. Remember, the headline is property tax relief now, but doing it in a way that's sustainable for our local services, particularly schools. So let's talk about the schools. Well, we're asking voters to retain an additional 1% on the revenue retention formula so that we can backfill local schools and local services. K-12, 100% backfill. So they're going to be kept whole if HH passes by using this mechanism. So let's go on the next slide. It's 1% change, and let's look at what that means historically. So if we go to the next slide, you can see what this looks like compared to Ref C. Ref C was brought in under the Owens administration in 2005. You can see kind of the size of the change. Ref C was a really sizable change. You can see how the change proposed in HH is relatively small compared to Ref C. This is really the necessary change we need to make sure that we can do those backfills of local services in K-12. And you can kind of look at what the next 10 years looks like of how that cap changes. Of course, it depends on what happens in the economy for how much that actually affects refunds. But you can see in this graph what that compares to and what we did in 2005 with referendum C. On the next slide, this gives us a chance to look at what happens with Tabor refunds. I think there's been a huge amount of misinformation out there that Tabor refunds suddenly go away under HH. That's simply not true. In fact, for the vast majority of taxpayers, their Tabor refund actually goes up next year. The 2023 refund for everybody making less than 100,000 actually increases next year. And so Tabor refunds are not going away. We are changing how they're calculated. We are changing how they're distributed, but still very sizable refunds for the vast majority of Colorado taxpayers. So go on to the next slide. There's really two choices here. We can do Prop HH that I've just explained the different parts of that proposal, and how it's great for seniors, how it's great for school funding, how it's great for property owners across the state, and how it is going to benefit renters. The other choice is to repeat the mistake that they've already made in California. Why Colorado would go down the avenue of repeating the Prop 13 mistake, I don't know. But the right-wing donors who are saying no on HH want you to buy into Initiative 50 instead, and that is being put on the ballot in 2024. So we're at a fork in the road. Either we do this in a sustainable way that protects local funding and protects local services, or we eviscerate those budgets. Makes no sense to me to repeat that mistake, and that's why I'm such a big proponent of Proposition HH. The final slide I have for you is just kind of what this coalition looks like. We've got a broad set of endorsements from the teachers to the League of Women Voters to the PTA to the firefighters, including Colorado Concern, which is one of the biggest business groups in the state of Colorado. And of course, Governor Polis and some of the other education funding groups also very much in support of HH. So I think we've built a broad coalition. We've got a great path to victory, but I'm here today to ask for your support for HH. I think this accomplishes the most immediate need, which is really taking the edge off of this 50% increase in values that we've seen. We badly need property tax relief right now. HH delivers that, but importantly, does it in a way that doesn't hurt our schools, doesn't hurt our firefighters, and the other important local services. So a big thank you for having me today. I appreciate the Chamber of Commerce's invitation. And Kelly, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. We will now turn over to Senator Barbara Kirkmeyer for get the contrary view. Senator.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. And thank you to the Westminster Chamber for having us here today to talk about HH. So let me just go right to who is in opposition of Proposition HH. That would be the National Federation of Independent Businesses. So that's the more than 250,000 small businesses that they represent here in Colorado that are opposing Proposition HH, as well as Realtors Association, as well as pretty much every local government organization there is. Colorado Counties, Special Districts Association, the Municipal League, Club 20, Pro 15, and Action 22, all in opposition to Proposition HH. And why? Because it's really not that great a deal. Your property taxes will still increase. It's really, I mean, seriously, leave it up to a bunch of politicians to tell you you're getting property tax relief because we're decreasing your increase. But the bottom line is property taxes are still going to increase for everyone, including commercial and residential. This all happened because of what occurred back in 2020 when we repealed the Gallagher Amendment. The Gallagher Amendment, for those of you who don't know, was a constitutional amendment, and it was like what I like to call a safety net for residential property tax owners. And essentially what was happening is our assessment ratio was being dropped, ratcheted down year after year because of what was in that constitutional amendment. Back in 2020, Governor Polis, and quite frankly, it was a bipartisan piece of legislation that referred it to the ballot to get rid of, repeal the Gallagher Amendment. But my colleagues then, who I wasn't in the state Senate, I was a county commissioner then, decided it was a good idea. And they told everybody, you know, that lived in residential property owners that your property taxes would go down. And look what happened. They didn't go down because apparently either they didn't understand how property taxes worked back in 2020, or they were intentionally misleading people. The governor actually told people about a week before the election that if you don't vote for this to repeal the Gallagher Amendment, to get rid of this safety net, that your property taxes are just going to go up. Apparently, again, the governor did not understand that there are three things that impact your property taxes. It is the value of your property times the assessment rate times the mill levy. Now, the value of your property is not controlled by the legislature or by your local government taxing authority. What is controlled by the legislature, however, is the assessment rate. And we could have just lowered the assessment rate without coming to a vote. Because you see, we don't need to ask your permission to decrease taxes. We only have to ask your permission when we're trying to increase taxes. So this is nothing more than essentially trying to increase your taxes, because your property taxes will still go up with a very minor percent decrease in the assessment rate that was allowed, or that is allowed in Proposition HH, because your Tabor refunds will eventually go away to the tune of $10 billion over the next 10 years. And that's not Barbara Kirkmeyer or other Republican groups telling you that. That is the Legislative Council Services, who is the nonpartisan staff to the legislature that came up with a very conservative estimate using in the out years 2.5% in inflation growth, and telling us that it's at least $10 billion of Tabor refunds that are giving up. So our state legislators, my Democratic colleagues, like Senator Hansen in the Senate, thought it was a great idea to go mess around in property taxes, which the state doesn't receive. We receive income tax and sales tax. Property taxes are at the local government level. We thought it was great to go there, cap them, tell them what they're going to do, promise them a backfill that essentially, about 4,000 or so, actually 4,500 of the 5,600 special districts, taxing districts that are out there, local government taxing districts, will not be receiving any backfill under Proposition HH. So again, we weren't really out there looking out for local governments, for fire districts, for ambulance districts, or counties or cities. We are essentially working at how do we get rid of Tabor refunds, try to dismantle Tabor. The legislature was doing this along with the governor to essentially, again, increase your property taxes, lose Tabor refunds, grow state government. Sound like a great deal? Only if you're a Democrat in the legislature does that sound like a good deal. So again, you've heard that renters are going to win under this, or that they're going to be just fine under this. You know, renters don't pay property tax. So they just get to give up their Tabor refunds over the course of the next 10 years. And we were told on the Senate floor that, oh yes, landlords will decrease the rent because they're going to get property tax relief. Well, I just told you. And so did Senator Hansen. Your property taxes are still going up. They're just getting a small decrease in the increase, but property taxes are going up. So renters, you're not going to see any reduction in your rent. In fact, they're probably going to increase. So renters, you're not going to win. And really, there's like 1 out of, 40% of Coloradoans are renters. So that's about 2.4 million people in Colorado. It's about 1/3 of our household are renters. They don't see any relief. Now, with regard to seniors, I would wholeheartedly agree with Senator Hansen that the portability on the senior property tax exemption is needed, and it's a great thing to have in Proposition HH. But if it's so needed and it's so great, why didn't the legislature just vote for it and do it? Because we could have done that. We could have given a greater senior property tax exemption, and we could have made it portable, and we could have just done that at the legislature. Because again, to try and decrease your taxes doesn't need a vote. So the whole purpose of putting that in the bill was to try and incentivize seniors to vote to give away their Tabor refunds eventually over the next 10 years. With regard to school funding, this one just really, I just find this one either disappointing or just so totally surprised by the way this has been presented. Do you know that we have a constitutional requirement to fully fund public education for a fair, uniform, and consistent public education system across the state? We also had a constitutional amendment that, and I'm going to boil it down, there was a lot more to it, but that essentially requires the state to fund education by increasing it by inflation every year. Well, in 2009, Democrats and the Democrat governor, they didn't like that idea. And they decided they were going to find, as one representative called it, a loophole in the Constitution. And we don't fully fund education. In fact, we haven't fully funded education for essentially the last 14 years. Last year in the governor's budget proposal, he came in 10 cents on the dollar to fully fund education. We have been, in the last year, we shortchanged students in education $321 million. That's what we should have been funding them under the Constitution. But no, the governor said, oh, I'm coming in with a request. Let's buy that down by $35 million. When we could have fully funded education. So we don't need your Tabor refund to fully fund education, because within our fund balances and our unrestricted reserves, We have anywhere from $4.6 to $5 billion just sitting in our coffers. So tell me, why do I need you to give me a Tabor refund when I've got money in the bank that I could have fully funded education? And do you trust these guys? Because for the last 14 years, they have not been fully funding education. So again, your property taxes will be increasing. We're going after your Tabor refunds. We are growing state government. We could have decreased all your taxes in the session. We could have just done our job. But instead, my Democrat colleagues and friends on the other side of the aisle, along with Governor Polis, decided to go after your Tabor refunds and grow state government to the tune of at least $10 billion over the course of the next 10 years. Now, I've heard that we're in a property tax crisis. I've heard people say about a property tax hike, which I believe we did with the Gallagher Amendment. And so if we're having this kind of problems, why? Why wouldn't the legislature just really look at where they could do to help the people of Colorado to make ends meet, to not have such high tax increases? Why didn't we just do that in the legislature? And again, the bottom line is because they're really trying to go after Tabor and get rid of your Tabor refunds. Remember that check you got last year, that $750 check? This year, it's supposed to be like $894 or $881, somewhere around there, close to $900 per individual. Eventually, that will go away over the course of the 10 years. And here's the other little hidden gem that's within Proposition HH. There's a provision in there that basically says we, meaning the legislature, we don't ever have to come back to a vote of the people to do away with Tabor refunds. That as long as we keep the same amount of assessment ratios, whether it's, the residential at 6.7 assessment rate or the commercial at 27 or 28, as long as we keep the same kind of ratio, we can keep your Tabor refunds in perpetuity. And what that means over the course of the next 20 years is $42 billion. I heard the governor say last night that the Tabor surplus isn't your money, that it's government's money. And that's not what the Constitution says. That says if we go over that cap, if we collect too much taxes, that we're supposed to refund it back to the taxpayer. Essentially, it's your money. But government, state government, thinks that they need to grow more. We don't have a revenue issue. We have a prioritization issue. And we can solve that at the legislature. We don't need to go to a vote to decrease your taxes. Your taxes will be going up. I hope that you will join me in voting no on Proposition H. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Exactly 10 minutes. Very good for both of you. We are a few minutes ahead of schedule, so I'm going to call an audible, and I will allow each of you 1 minute for a close. Senator Hansen, we'll start with you. 1 minute, best elevator speech. Give us your best 1 minute argument for why Senator Kirkmeyer was wrong just now.
Well, this ought to be good.
Yeah, well, I'm sure I gave you my best 10 minutes, but I'll try to do another best one. I was just saying in kind of a rebuttal. I mean, I certainly understand Senator Kirkmeyer's point of view on this. I think we're doing exactly what the Constitution tells us to do, which is if we want to retain revenue that's already collected, we have to ask the voters, and that's exactly what we're doing. And to say that, hey, it's just as easy as prioritization, Senator Kirkmeyer is giving you no indication of what she wants to cut to change the funding of the current budget. So it sounds great. Like, hey, this is so easy. We could just show up and cut property taxes and make the senior homestead portable for everybody. But what Senator Kirkmeyer is not telling you is how she wants to pay for those things. And that's what I think is really missing from the no argument, is it's just very kind of simple, right? We'll just take our Harry Potter magic wand and we'll just cut taxes for everybody and hope that our services can stay stable. Well, I've got 2 kids in public school. I know that's not the case. They have been underfunded for years, and I refuse to let that situation continue. And that's why I was a prime sponsor of HH, and it's why I'm working hard on this campaign, because we can deliver property tax relief right now and do it in a way that doesn't hurt schools. And magical thinking that we've just got extra money for everything simply isn't true. And HH really tries to address this head on and create a balanced approach. And that's why I'm such a big proponent.
Thank you, Senator. Before we go to Senator Kirkmeyer, I just want to check, make sure if we have any questions. I don't see any. Juliet, do we have any comments?
Well, there's a good morning.
We have a few comments we can go through here. Okay. Senator Kirkmeyer, 1 minute to say why Senator Hansen was wrong.
Great. Thank you so much. So first of all, I used to be a county commissioner for 20 years, led my county to zero debt while at the same time reducing mill levies by 7 mills since about 2003. And we kept increasing that till we got to 7 mills. It is possible to do it and to go in and prioritize in your budget and tell people what you're exactly going to spend on. With regard to education funding, the money is there. We have $1.1 to $1.2 billion in the state education fund that's just sitting in our coffers. That was at the end of the balance of the budget, and that's in our budget. Go look. That's what the fund balance is in there as of June 30th. We also had $1.2 billion in the permanent trust fund. Those are funds that are supposed to be used for education. We also have another $2.2 billion plus growing. It's actually more because things that passed at the end of last session, like that land use bill 213 that had $100 million in it for an assessment. So we actually have reserves that are plenty. 2.2, they're unrestricted reserves, the reserves, and it's a more than $2.2 billion. I just don't have the number. So we're sitting on $4.6 billion in our budget. I don't have to go make any cuts anywhere. I just have to actually spend the money that's supposed to go to education on education. So again, this is going to be, your property taxes are still going to increase. Your Tabor refunds are going to go away to the tune of $10 billion over 10 years. We didn't need to come to you to ask you to decrease taxes. We should have just gotten our job done in the session, or we should have a special session and then go get it done there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you both. We will do one more very quick check for questions. Doesn't look like we have any. So one point of clarification, I used the word senior in the classical sense, meaning august, experienced, and knowledgeable leaders in the upper chamber. I am proud and honored to call both of these fine senators friends, I hope. And we are certainly honored to have had both of them here to give their perspectives. Thank you all for joining. Please refer to, thank you both. And please refer, all of you are on here periodically to the Chamber's website and our elections page for the most up-to-date information on candidates and issues. I would like to thank our President and CEO, Juliet Abdul, and would once again like to thank Senator Hansen and Senator Kirkmeyer for doing us the honor of joining us this morning. Thank you very much, and everybody have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.